I was just watering the lavender pots on the porch when the bucket slammed into my temple. "Don't touch my house," she screamed. Blood and water mixed on the tile, and my son just stood in the shadow, saying nothing. They didn't know I signed the paper that made this house mine in a way they never understood. My name is Lorraine Mercer. I am 66 years old. For 34 of those years, I worked in the Arbormere County Assessor's Office. I know land. I know setbacks and easements and the precise, unforgiving language of a property plat. My husband, Walter, used to say I could see the history of a town just by looking at its drainage ditches. He's gone now, and I am here, in Maple Ridge, Colorado, on a summer afternoon so bright the sun feels like a physical weight. I was on the front porch of my son Ethan's house. The house his wife Sloane never lets me forget is hers. The lavender pots were drooping, their leaves dusty and grey under the heat. I was just giving them a little water, the hose nozzle set to a gentle mist. I never saw the bucket swing. The impact was a sharp, metallic slam against my right temple. It wasn't the pain that registered first. It was the shock of cold water and gritty potting soil exploding over my face, blinding me. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the flagstone. "Don't touch my house, Sloane." She was on the top step, vibrating with a rage that seemed too big for her small frame. She still held the empty plastic bucket, white-knuckled. "Sloane." I was just... Get away from it. Get off my porch. "What did I tell you about touching my things?" I put a hand to my head. When I pulled it away, my fingers were streaked with water, mud, and a bright, shocking line of red. Ethan was there. He was standing just inside the screen door, a dark silhouette against the cooler hallway. He was 6 feet away. He didn't move. He didn't speak. The only sounds were the sudden, frantic flutter of sparrows erupting from the awning, the thud of the watering bucket I had dropped, and the steady hiss of the hose I'd let go, snaking across the patio and spraying water uselessly onto the hot stone. His silence was an answer. Shame is a physical thing. It's hot, and it rises from the stomach and tightens the throat. My eye was already starting to swell, grit scratching under the lid. I bent, not to defend myself, but to rescue the pot of purple heather she had knocked over. Soil spilled across the tiles I had swept just that morning. "Leave it," she shrieked. "It's ruined. Everything you touch, you ruin." Sloane stepped down, jabbing a finger toward the lawn. "Get off. You are trespassing on my property. You are a guest here, Lorraine. You are just staying here. You don't touch anything." I backed away. My vision was blurred, half by the impact, half by the muddy water. I blinked, trying to clear my eyes, and my gaze fixed on the edge of the yard, past the aggressively pruned hedges, to the concrete drainage ditch. I knew that ditch. I remembered the file. I remembered the survey plat from 1972, the easement disputes, the precise boundary line. I knew exactly where their property ended. And I knew, looking at the brand new, oversized balcony Sloane had built last spring, that it was hanging 3 feet over that line. A thought, cold and precise, cut right through the pain. "Ethan," I said. My voice was a whisper, hardly audible over the hiss of the hose. I was appealing to the shadow in the doorway. The shadow finally moved. He pushed the screen door open just enough to hiss, "Mum, just stop. Don't make a scene. Just go inside." He didn't mean his inside. He meant my inside, the small guest room at the back, He meant go away. Sloane crossed her arms, a smug, victorious smile twisting her lips. Ethan didn't look at me. He just backed into the darkness of the hall and pulled the heavy front door closed. I heard the click, and then the solid, heavy thunk of the deadbolt engaging, the sound of a relationship being severed. I stood there on the walkway for a long minute, the sun baking the mud onto my face. The bleeding was slowing. Slowly. I reached into the pocket of my gardening apron and pulled out the soft flannel cloth I used for wiping shears. I pressed it gently to my temple, the fabric warm against my skin. The pain was real, but it suddenly felt distant, inside me. The panic and the humiliation had evaporated, leaving behind something hard, still, and very, very cold. They had locked the door. They had forgotten. I have a key, and they have no idea what door it truly opens. The blood was already drying on my temple when I finally retreated to my room. It wasn't really a room, but a large, converted closet off the laundry. It smelled of bleach and fabric softener. It was a sharp contrast to the life I'd had. My husband, Walter. And I had a language built on soil and sunlight. On Saturday mornings, we wouldn't talk until we'd had our first cup of coffee, and then we'd be out in the yard for hours. He'd be on the ladder, tending to the climbing roses that covered our chimney, and I'd be on my knees, splitting lavender and thyme. Our hands were always dirty. Our house smelled like us. I took retirement early. It seemed like the right thing to do. But 6 months after Walter passed, I slipped on a patch of wet leaves, his leaves, from his favourite oak, and shattered my right wrist. The doctor said it was a bad break, a complication break, and at my age, it would take time. Ethan insisted I come stay with them, just until you're healed. Mom, we can take care of you. I arrived with one suitcase and my gardening journal. Sloane welcomed me with a list of rules, delivered with a smile so tight it looked painful. Don't use the front-facing kitchen appliances. They were for show. Don't touch the white thermostat. Don't move the decorative objects on any surface. And her most fervent rule, do not, under any circumstances, plant anything in her yard. It's just so messy. Lorraine, the dirt, the bugs. So I made myself small. I became a ghost who did chores. I learned Ethan's schedule, Sloane's schedule, and found the gaps. I would wake at 5, long before them, and do the laundry, folding Ethan's shirts just the way he liked. I would wipe down the kitchen counters after they left, finding the crumbs and coffee rings they ignored. I would only go into the backyard after dusk, quietly deadheading the roses they had planted, but she neglected, my work hidden by the twilight. The pressure was constant, a slow, steady leak of disrespect. A text message sent to Ethan, but one I was clearly meant to see on his locked screen. Tell your mother to stop leaving her country decor out. It's tacky. That was about my hand-knitted Afghan, the one I'd draped over the chair in my own small room. My nights were the worst. The air conditioner in the wall unit cycled on and off with a metallic shudder, a rhythm that seemed to count every second of my loneliness. My wrist ached when the barometer dropped. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling. My broken bone and my broken heart throbbed in unison. The first time she crossed the line from coldness to cruelty, it was over a smell. I had been feeling a shadow of my old self and decided to bake. A simple pound cake. Walter's favourite, using my own butter and eggs. The smell of vanilla and warmed sugar filled the house. When Sloane came home, she didn't just tell me to stop. She walked to the oven, pulled the rack out and took the pan. The smell of butter clings to the curtains. Lorraine, I have clients coming. She dumped the hot, perfect cake directly into the kitchen trash. I looked at Ethan. He just gave a small, helpless laugh and said, "Well, Sloane, it did smell pretty strong. That was when I stopped being just a grieving mother. That was when the assessor in me woke up. I started a new notebook. Not my gardening journal, but a black, hardcover ledger. I began to write things down. I noted the date, October 5th, when the caterer's invoice for one of Sloane's at-home parties was left on the counter. I wrote down the name of the rental company that delivered 20 chairs and 6 tables. I started taking walks not just for my wrist, but for my mind. I'd walk the perimeter of their property, the one I knew so well. I used the camera on my old phone. I took a picture of the new balcony, careful to include the drainage ditch in the frame. I took a picture of the property survey marker I found under a bush she'd tried to plant over it. My memory, trained by decades of files, started pulling up the old records, the Maple Ridge Land Trust, the ground lease, the supplements, the things Ethan had never bothered to read and Sloane had never known to ask about. I sat in my bleach-scented room, the pain in my head from the bucket already fading to a dull throb. I opened my black ledger. The seed of a plan, a legal, precise, and unassailable plan, was already there. It was rooted in the same soil Walter and I had loved, and I was going to tend to it. Sloane thought the house was her masterpiece. She thought it was her name on the deed that mattered. What she didn't know, what Ethan had been too proud or too lazy to ever read, was that the deed was just a piece of paper. The land was the real power. Years ago, when Ethan and Sloane were desperate to buy in Maple Ridge, they were short. They were short by about 60% of the down payment. Walter and I gave it to them. It wasn't a gift. Walter was a kind man, but he was no fool. He had his best friend, a man who ran the Maple Ridge Land Trust, draw up the paperwork. In the county assessor's office, the records are clear. If you know how to read them, the land itself belongs to the trust. The house, the physical structure, belongs to Ethan and Sloane under a 99-year ground lease, and buried in a private addendum to that trust document, there is a simple clause, a life estate granted to Lorraine Mercer, ensuring my right to live on that property, undisturbed, until my death. Sloane thought she owned it all. She just owned the lumber, plaster, and glass sitting on someone else's soil. My soil. With the clarity of a tax map, it all came into focus. My black ledger filled up quickly. I started with the balcony. From my window, I could see it. Last spring's project. A sprawling redwood deck where Sloane hosted sunset cocktail previews for her clients. Using a simple measuring tape when they were out, I confirmed what my eyes already knew. It extended 3.5 feet over the platted property line, trespassing onto the neighbouring parcel, a small, empty lot also owned and protected by the land trust. Then, I documented the drainage ditch, the one I had looked at while blood dried on my face. Sloane had filled a 10-foot section with concrete pavers and gravel, creating a charming rustic patio for her wedding photo backdrops. But that ditch wasn't decorative. It was a primary storm runoff culvert for the entire street. By blocking it, she was risking flooding for 3 of her neighbours and violating a county easement. The business was the easiest part. Sloane was sloppy. She ran a full-scale event service from a residential-zoned property. I cross-referenced the county tax rolls online. They were claiming a standard residential exemption, paying the lowest possible rate, while their Instagram advertised boutique weekend event packages. This was a direct violation of the ground lease, county zoning, and the Homeowners Association CC&Rs. I took pictures of the rental trucks. I saved the invoices for portable toilets that she carelessly left in the recycling bin. I logged the dates and times of every party, the noise violations, the cars parked illegally on the street. My first step was quiet. I was, after all, a beneficiary. I typed up a simple, formal letter. It was polite. It cited the specific clauses of the land trust agreement and the CC&Rs being violated the trespassing structure, the blocked easement, the unpermitted commercial activity. I identified myself as a beneficiary of the life estate and requested all violations be cured within 30 days. I printed it, put it in a business envelope, and left it on the kitchen counter for her. I was in the laundry room, folding Ethan's socks, when she found it. I heard her rip the envelope open. She marched into the laundry, waving the paper in my face. "What is this joke?" she sneered. "Life estate beneficiary. Are you senile? This is junk mail." She tore the letter in half, then in quarters, and dropped the pieces on the clean, folded towels. I looked up from my work, my hands still. I gave her a small, tight smile. "That's just paper? Sloan?" She rolled her eyes and walked out. I watched her go, then said to the empty doorway, "But paper is what makes courthouse doors open." Sloane's response to my letter was to throw a party, not just a party, but a full-scale menu tasting for a potential $20,000 wedding client. It started at 4 on a Thursday. The catering truck, a massive silver box, arrived and promptly parked directly over the drainage ditch I had warned her about, blocking it completely. By 6, the bass from the speakers she'd set up on the illegal balcony was rattling the single-pane glass in my small room. I gave them until 7 o'clock, the designated quiet hour in the CC&Rs. At 7:01, I walked out onto the back patio. Sloane was holding court with a group of people, all of them holding champagne flutes. "Sloane," I said, loud enough to be heard over the music. "It's past 7. You're in violation of the noise ordinance." She turned, her smile freezing. "Excuse me, the noise ordinance. And your catering truck is blocking a county easement. You need to turn the music off and have the truck moved." She walked over to me, her heels clicking on the deck. She got so close I could smell the wine on her breath. "You don't tell me what to do in my own home, you old meddler." She shoved me, hard, in the shoulder. I stumbled back, catching my balance on a decorative pillar. Then, she turned her head and spat on the flagstone, just an inch from my foot. Sloane Ethan was there, running over, a plate of tiny appetizers in his hand. "What's going on? Your mother is trying to ruin my event. She's harassing my guests." "Mom," Ethan said, his voice a desperate, placating whine. "Please, just be reasonable. This is an important client. This is our income. This is a residential neighborhood." "Ethan," I said, my voice perfectly level. I pulled a small, folded paper from my pocket, my copy of the CC&Rs. Per Section 4, Subsection A, any noise audible past the property line must cease at 7 p.m. Per Section 9, Subsection C. No vehicle over 2 tons may be parked on any part of the property not designated as a driveway. And per the county code, that deck you're standing on is an unpermitted structure. Sloane laughed. A high, brittle sound. "You think your little rules matter. Look around. Lorraine, I am making this happen. She swept her arm out, indicating the party. You're just a bitter old woman. You want to stop me. Then sue me. She turned her back on me and cranked the music up louder. I went back to my room. I did not sue her. Not yet. I sat on my bed and, using my old phone, I made a call to the Arbormere County Building Code Violation Hotline. I reported an unpermitted, elevated deck structure at 124 Willow Creek Drive, noting that it appeared to be overloaded with people and posed a potential safety hazard. I gave them my name. The police came at 10:30. The party was still loud. Their flashing lights, blue and red, lit up the entire front of the house. I watched from my window as Ethan, his face pale and mortified, tried to explain. The officers shut the party down. Later. Sloane was in her office, which was next to my room. She was on a live stream, sobbing to her followers. I am just trying to build my dream, she cried, and I am being attacked by jealous, toxic people. A horrible neighbor is trying to destroy me. Her followers flooded her with support, with sympathy, with donations to fight the haters. Around midnight, there was a quiet knock on my door. It was Ethan. Mom, he whispered. Sloane is... She's really upset. This was a disaster. The client left. I just looked at him. Look, we have a small cash flow emergency from this. Sloane needs to order new decorative panels for the next event, and my card is maxed out. Could I just borrow your credit card? Just for a day or two. Just to smooth things over. I looked at my son, the man Walter and I had raised. No, Ethan. His face hardened. Right. Fine. I don't know why I bothered. He left, and a minute later I heard Sloane's voice, sharp and clear through the wall. She said no. Didn't she? Useless. It doesn't matter. I am the dream maker in this house. Ethan. I will handle this. I will handle her. I turned off my light. As I lay in the dark, I thought of something else I'd seen. A small detail. A grey plastic pipe, hastily hidden behind a row of bushes, running from their laundry room. A pipe she had installed herself, without a permit, to dump her washer's grey water directly into the landscaping, directly into the same drainage ditch she had already blocked. Another violation. Another piece of paper. The anger and the stress were a spike in my blood. I knew I wouldn't sleep. The next afternoon, the sun was high and hot. The lavender pots on the front porch, neglected after the chaos, were wilting badly. The soil was cracked. I thought, I will not let them kill everything. I will give them water. I went outside, picked up the hose, and turned the nozzle to a gentle mist. The cut on my temple from the bucket was the last signature I needed. It was an eviction notice from the life I'd been trying to live, and I accepted it. Within 48 hours, I had packed my 2 suitcases and moved out. I found a small, furnished apartment on the 2nd floor above a bakery in the old downtown district. It was quiet, smelled of yeast and cardamom, and was a 10-minute walk from the county courthouse. The first thing I did was brew a cup of tea. The second thing I did was call Mason Hart. Mason wasn't a divorce lawyer. He was a land use attorney. The driest, most precise man I had ever known in Arbormere County. He had been a friend of Walter's. He specialized in boundaries. Lorraine, he said, his voice crackling over the phone. I met him in his office the next day. I brought my black ledger. He read my notes in silence, his fingers steepled. He looked at the photos of the balcony, the concrete-filled ditch, and the saved invoices from Sloane's parties. He tapped the copy of the Land Trust Addendum, my life estate. Walter always did love an airtight clause, Mason said, a thin smile playing on his lips. This isn't a family squabble. Lorraine, this is a simple breach of contract. Multiple breaches. In fact, they are trespassing. They are in violation of county easements, and they are running an unpermitted business on trust land. From that sterile office, the rebirth began. First, Mason activated the audit clause within the Maple Ridge Land Trust. As a named beneficiary, I had the right. This triggered a formal review of the property's use. Second, a letter went out. Not from me, but from Mason's firm, on behalf of the trust. It was a formal notice to cure, sent via certified mail. It was brutal in its simplicity. It gave them 14 days. 14 days to dismantle and remove the trespassing balcony structure. 14 days to excavate the blocked drainage ditch and restore it to its original, county-approved specifications. 14 days to cease and desist all commercial activity, including any client meetings, events, or advertised services from the residential property. But I wasn't just hitting them from the top. I was hitting them from the sides. Sloane had always mocked the Homeowners Association, calling their rules tacky. While Mason's letter addressed the land, I filed a separate, detailed, and anonymous complaint with the HOA. I cited the exact CC&Rs she had broken, the unapproved, garish paint colour on her front door, the permanent 3-foot Sloane's Events sign she had illegally installed by the mailbox, the excessive string lights, the kind used on restaurant patios, that violated the seasonal decorating clause. 2 days after the first letter, Mason's second letter landed. This one was a notice of ground lease violation. It stated, in cold, legal prose, that failure to cure the defaults listed in the first notice within the 14-day window would constitute a non-negotiable breach. The trust would then have the right to terminate their 99-year ground lease. They were being hit with paperwork they couldn't ignore. But I knew my son, and I knew Sloane. They were all pride and no cash. Ethan's request for my credit card had proven it. So I made a third call. I had my financial advisor trace the second mortgage on their house, the one they took out 2 years ago to fund Sloane's dream. As I expected, it had been bundled and sold, eventually landing in the portfolio of a distressed debt fund in Denver. Using the money Walter had left me the nest egg I had once intended for Ethan, I bought the note. I purchased their debt for 65 cents on the dollar. The transaction was finalized on a Tuesday. The paperwork was filed under a new holding company, Arbormere Assessor LLC. I, Lorraine Mercer, was now the secondary lien holder on their home. The first letters from the debt servicer, noting the change in ownership, went out to Ethan. Sloane, meanwhile, was in full panic. She went online, announcing an emergency, ticketed, Save My Business floral design workshop to be held at the house. She was actively advertising a new violation while the cure notice was ticking. I waited a week. Then, from my quiet apartment, I called Ethan's cell phone. He answered on the 5th ring. "Mom?" His voice was thin, wary. "Hello, Ethan? I'm just calling to check in on you. See how you are?" There was a long silence. I heard him take a shaky breath. We're fine. Mum. It's just, we're having some trouble with the HOA and some legal stuff. This was it. This was the opening. The chance for him to say, "I'm sorry. I'll fix it. I was wrong." Legal stuff. I asked, My voice calm. That sounds serious. It's just a misunderstanding, he said, the weakness in his voice turning to annoyance. Sloane says it's just neighbors being jealous. We'll handle it. We're fine. He was still lying. He was still choosing her. I see, I said. Well, take care of yourself. I hung up the phone. I opened my black ledger and turned to a new page. I wrote one sentence. I am not punishing. I am correcting the boundary lines. The 14-day clock was ticking, and with every passing day, the pressure I applied from a distance increased. On day 3, the city inspector I had called about the balcony showed up. Sloane must have refused him entry, because he came back. This time with a warrant based on my grey water pipe complaint. He walked the property line. He found the pipe. He documented the illegal discharge of untreated water directly into the county easement. The next day, a notice was posted on their door, a $5,000 fine for environmental contamination, with an additional $500 per day penalty until the pipe was professionally capped and the soil remediated. On day 5, the HOA's first bill arrived, having found them in violation of the paint, signage, and lighting codes. The association began levying the maximum daily fine $200 a day. Sloane, predictably, exploded. Not with action, but with words. She took to her social media, posting a tearful 10-minute video. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. She railed against an evil, bitter old woman who was pathologically jealous of her success and was weaponizing boring neighborhood rules to destroy her dream. It was a masterpiece of victimhood. It was also a terrible mistake. A reporter from the Maple Ridge Monitor, the local paper, saw the post. The reporter started digging, cross-referencing her business page with the HOA complaints. On day 7, a story ran on the front page of the local section. The headline was, "Dream Event Service, a Nightmare for Neighbors in Quiet Zone." They blurred the house number, but they used a photo of her illegal balcony. Everyone on the street knew exactly who it was. The fallout was immediate. On day 8, Ethan called me. He sounded broken. "Mom, what did you do?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "Ethan." "The paper." My boss saw the article. He called me in. He said the scandal is unbecoming of the firm. He mentioned my quarterly bonus. He told me to fix my house. He was weeping. "Your house is in violation." "Ethan," I said, my voice flat. "That is a fact. She's just trying to build something. Why are you doing this?" "I am a beneficiary of the land you live on. Ethan, the trust agreement, which you signed, has rules. You broke them. Now, fix them." "We can't," he yelled. "We don't have $5,000. We can't afford to tear down the deck. Can't you just call them off?" "No," I said. "I can't." I hung up. He was asking me to stop the consequences, not to fix the problem. On day 10, with the ground lease termination looming, Mason Hart played my next card. Instead of filing for immediate eviction, he triggered the mandatory mediation clause in the trust agreement. It was a formal proceeding, held in a conference room at the trust's office. It was, as Mason put it, a chessboard where we own the rules. They showed up looking ravaged. Ethan's suit was rumpled. Sloane's eyes were red and puffy, her face a mask of defiant misery. I was there with Mason. A neutral mediator, a retired judge, sat at the head of the table. The mediator started. This meeting is to address the multiple, severe breaches of the ground lease. Sloane didn't let him finish. She burst into theatrical sobs. "She's trying to steal my house," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's a vindictive, horrible woman. She was always jealous of me, jealous of what I built." Ethan tried to quiet her. "Sloane, this is illegal." "No, Ethan. She is trying to make us homeless. She's evil." I sat in silence. I let her tire herself out. When her sobs subsided into hiccuping gasps, the mediator looked at me. "Mrs. Mercer, your response." I didn't speak. I simply opened my file. I placed the first item on the table, a surveyor's plat map, with the boundary line highlighted in red. Then, the second, a high-resolution, time-stamped photo of the balcony, clearly showing its trespass over that red line. Third, copies of the invoices and social media posts from her illegal events. Fourth, the city's environmental fine. Fifth, the HOA's daily penalties, now totaling over $2,000. Sloane's breathing had stopped. She was staring at the pile of evidence. "Sloane," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying in the silent room. "You call this your house? You seem to be confused." I slid the final document across the table to Ethan. "This, Ethan, is what you signed." He picked it up. It was the original ground lease. "The house, the structure, is yours," I said. "But the land it sits on, belongs to the trust. You are a tenant on a 99-year lease, a lease you have now broken." Ethan stared at the paper, his face turning a sickly grey. He was reading it. He was finally actually reading the words. He saw the signatures. He saw the clauses. He saw, for the first time, that he was not a homeowner. He was a renter with a very long contract. He dropped the papers. He put his head in his hands and audibly slumped in his chair, a man collapsing. Sloane's face was white. "What, Ethan? What is he? What is she saying?" "And one more thing," I said. I placed the last file on the table. "The second mortgage, the one you took out for the renovations." I pushed the transferred note, with Arbormere Assessor LLC as the lien holder, toward her. "You have also been defaulting on your payments to me." Sloane made a small, strangled sound. The game was over. The mediator, seeing his opening, cleared his throat. "Given this clarity, the trust is prepared to offer a final, non-negotiable resolution." The terms were simple. A final 10-day deadline. In that time, the balcony must be fully removed. The ditch must be fully excavated. All city and HOA fines must be paid in full. And a formal, written apology must be delivered to every resident on the street for the noise and the violations. "If any single term is not met by the deadline," Mason said, "the trust will terminate the lease and begin eviction proceedings at 9 a.m. on the 11th day." I stood up. I gathered my files, leaving the copies on the table. I did not look at my son, who was still slumped in his chair. I did not look at his wife, who was staring at the mortgage paper as if it were a snake. I walked out of the room. My head was high. I didn't look back. But as I waited for the elevator, I had to press my hand against the wall to steady it. My hand was shaking. Walter was right about contracts, but he never said what to do when the contract was with your own child. The elevator doors closed, and I walked out of the building into the afternoon sun, which suddenly seemed too bright. The victory in the conference room felt cold, sterile. It tasted like metal. 2 days later, with the 10-day clock ticking. I drove to the cemetery. I brought a small pot of purple heather, the same kind I'd been trying to save on the porch. I knelt on the grass, the damp seeping through the knees of my slacks, and set the pot next to Walter's headstone. "Oh, Walter," I whispered to the granite. "I did what you would have done. I used the paperwork." I ran my fingers over his name. "You always said, 'Don't use love to prop up a bad contract, Lorraine. Use a good contract to protect what you love.' But what happens when the person you love is on the other side of the contract? What happens when you have to foreclose on your own son's life just to get him to see the truth?" The air was still. I pulled a small weed from the soil. I put him on this path. "Walter, I let him marry that woman. I stood by while she built her cheap little empire on top of your foundation. And now I'm the one bringing the whole thing down. Was this justice, or was it just revenge dressed up in a lawsuit?" The line felt blurry, indistinct, like a property marker lost in the weeds. I didn't have an answer. I just felt the bone-deep ache of a mother who had used a hammer when all she'd wanted was a key. That night, in my apartment, I wrote a letter to Ethan on my best stationery. I wrote, "If you take one step toward what is right, I will stand still. I will not get in your way. But I won't take that step for you. You have to move your own feet." I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and put it in my desk drawer. I had no intention of sending it. The next day, Mason called. "You'll appreciate this," he said. "Mrs. Sloane Mercer filed an emergency application for a commercial event permit this morning. A desperate move. Tried to get retroactive approval for her business." "And?" I asked. "Denied," he said. "The city rejected it in under an hour. Cited the pending environmental fines, the unpermitted structure, and my personal favourite, the insufficient hydrology report on the drainage ditch you pointed out." She was trapped. That evening, there was a knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. It was Ethan, standing alone in the hallway, holding a cheap-looking bouquet of gas station carnations. My hand went to the deadbolt. I unlocked it. But I left the chain on. I opened the door the few inches the chain would allow. He was standing there, his face puffy, his eyes red. He looked terrible. He looked like my son. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. He tried to push the flowers through the gap. Can I come in?" "No, Ethan." My voice was quiet, but it was firm. The brass chain between us felt as heavy and binding as a legal contract. He let his hand, the one with the flowers, drop. He stared at the floor. I'm sorry. Mom." "What are you sorry for?" "Ethan." He swallowed. "For everything. For the scene?" "The scene," I repeated. "When your wife hit me with a bucket, or when you locked the door while I was bleeding on the porch." He flinched. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine through the narrow gap. "I saw it," he whispered, the admission tearing out of him. "I saw her. I just didn't know what to do. She was screaming, and the clients were there, and I was just afraid. I was afraid of the scandal, of her live streaming." The honesty of his cowardice was more painful than the bucket had been. "You were more afraid of a scandal," I said, "than you were of letting your mother bleed on the walkway." That was the question, the one that mattered. He didn't have an answer. He just broke. He leaned his head against the door jamb, the flowers crushed against his leg. and he sobbed. Not a strategic, manipulative cry like Sloane's, but the ugly, broken, hopeless sound of a man who had seen the bottom. I watched him. I didn't open the chain. After a minute, he pulled himself together, wiping his face on his sleeve. "Please," he said, his voice raw. "The 10 days. It's not enough time. I can't. I can't get the money for the fines and pay for a demolition crew. I can't." "Then you will lose the house," I said. "No. Please, Mom. Please. I have all her event supplies. The tables, the lights, those stupid silk flowers. If I can just sell them, I can get enough cash to pay the environmental fine and rent the tools to tear down the deck myself. I just need time." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The eye was new. "I will sell them. I will tear it down." I was silent for a long time. The smell of the bakery downstairs, baking bread for the next morning, wafted up. "7 days," I said. "I will have Mason grant a one-time extension of 7 days." He looked up, his eyes wide with relief. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for you. I am allowing the trust to give you the chance to meet your obligations." I handed a piece of paper through the gap. "This is a list of what's required, the demolition specifications, the name of the soil remediation company you must use, and the number for the HOA compliance officer who will sign off." He took the list. 7 days. Ethan. Not 8. I closed the door. I slid the chain free. I engaged the deadbolt. I went to my black ledger and opened it. I wrote, "If he fixes the boundary, I will not push him. But I will not pull him, either." That night, I didn't sleep. The wind was high, and it rattled the old windows of my apartment. It sounded like Walter, walking the property line, checking the fences, breathing a long, slow sigh. Ethan had his 7-day extension, but Sloane had her own timeline. It started at 2 a.m, on the second night. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Mrs. Gable, my old neighbour from 2 doors down. "You awake? Lorraine. There's a commotion at your son's house. Looks like a work crew, but they're using flashlights." I sat up in bed, my heart a cold knot. Sloane wouldn't wait for a licensed crew. She was trying to hide the demolition under the cover of darkness. Another text came 20 minutes later. "Ambulance just arrived. No sirens, but the lights are flashing. Someone fell off that illegal deck. I think they're taking him away." By sunrise, the neighborhood message board was a wildfire. Sloane, in a desperate, characteristic panic, had hired an uninsured, cash-only crew from a website. One of the men had stepped on an unsecured board, falling nearly 6 feet onto the concrete pavers Sloane had installed. He'd shattered his wrist. The rest of the crew had vanished before the ambulance arrived. The scandal Ethan had feared was now a reality. They weren't just in violation of HOA rules, they were now facing a massive liability suit. While the neighborhood was still digesting the news of the midnight accident, my own phone rang. It was not Mason. It was a woman from a major title and escrow company in Arbormere. "Am I speaking with Mrs. Lorraine Mercer?" she asked, her voice all business. "Yes, you are. Mrs. Mercer. We are processing a title review for a property adjacent to 124 Willow Creek, and our underwriters are reviewing the area covenants, specifically the Maple Ridge Land Trust. We show you as a life estate beneficiary." "That is correct," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. Well, she said, and I heard her shuffle papers. We've flagged a springing clause in the original 1972 ground lease. We haven't seen one of these in a decade. It states that in the event of a material, environmental, or structural breach, which, according to county records, this property is now in the trust, has the sole discretion to immediately terminate the 99-year lease. It converts the tenant, in this case, Ethan Mercer and Sloane Mercer, to a month-to-month tenancy at fair market value, pending eviction. She paused. That's a remarkable amount of power. Mum, I thought you should be aware. I thanked her for her diligence and hung up. The dominoes were picking up speed. The HOA, spurred by the ambulance and the new liability risk, acted immediately. An email blast went out to every resident. Emergency meeting and open forum regarding the escalating safety and code violations at 124 Willow Creek. They were inviting the entire community to the execution. Sloane, completely cornered, did the only thing she knew how to do. She went to her phone. She posted a new video, but this one wasn't tearful. It was furious. "This is a coordinated attack," she yelled, her face blotchy and close to the camera. "This is a conspiracy by a jealous, bitter old woman, my husband's own mother, to destroy my licensed, registered business. I have paying clients, I have contracts. They are trying to steal my livelihood." Mason Hart called me within 5 minutes. He was practically laughing. "Did you see it?" "Lorraine." "The video, yes." She just publicly admitted, on a permanent social media record, that she is running a fee-based service from the property. She called it her licensed, registered business. She just handed us Exhibit A. Any claim she had that this was a hobby is gone. It's golden. As if on cue, a different email pinged my inbox. It was from Ethan. It wasn't a message. It was a bank receipt. A wire transfer. $5,000. Paid to the Arbormere County Environmental Fund. He had sold his car, the vintage Triumph convertible Walter had helped him restore. The one thing he truly loved. A second email followed. "Mum, I paid the fine. I'm starting on the ditch tonight. The meeting is in 2 days. Please just give me a chance to stand up. Give me a chance to take responsibility before you finish this. Please." He was trying, but I was fighting on 2 fronts. The trust was handling the land. I was still handling the debt. I called Mason. "Send the next one," I said. The following morning, a certified letter was delivered to their door. A formal notice of default on their second mortgage from Arbormere Assessor LLC. It stated that due to non-payment and the new, massive liability placed on the property, their loan was in default. They had 15 days to cure the full, accelerated amount. If not, I would begin foreclosure proceedings on the physical structure. That evening, Mrs. Gable texted me again. "He's out there. Your son. He's digging up the ditch with a shovel. By himself." I drove, parking 2 blocks away. I walked through the neighbor's yard, standing in the shadow of their oak tree. It was true. Ethan was in the ditch. The concrete pavers were stacked in a broken pile. He was covered in black, stinking mud, digging out the culvert by hand, his back straining, his breath fogging in the cool night air. He was alone. He was weeping. And he was working. I went back the next morning, just before dawn. I stood at the edge of the property line. The ditch was open. A small, muddy trickle of water was moving. The land could breathe again. I bent down. I cupped the cool, running water in my hand. I brought it to my face. splashing it on the faint scar on my temple where the bucket had struck me. The sting was gone. The HOE meeting was that night. I knew what I had to do. I would go. I would let Ethan speak. I would lay out the facts of the ground lease, the violations, the life estate. But I would hold one card back. I would not mention the second mortgage. That was my final ace. I would not play it unless I was forced. The countdown was over. The point of impact was here. The community clubhouse was packed. It wasn't just a meeting. It was a trial. They had run out of folding chairs, and people lined the walls, their arms crossed. I sat in the front row with Mason Hart. At the front of the room, a large electronic screen displayed the evidence. The HOA president, Mrs. Davies, stood beside it, her face grim. She clicked a remote. My photograph of the trespassing balcony appeared, oversized and undeniable. Click. The concrete-filled drainage ditch. Click. A spreadsheet of dates and times, documenting noise complaints. Click. A flurry of angry emails from the neighbors. And then, the centerpiece. Mrs. Davies played Sloane's own live stream video, the one where she had called herself a licensed registered business and a victim. The room was utterly silent as Sloane's digital, furious voice filled the air, admitting to everything. When the video ended, Mrs. Davies turned to the crowd. The board has tallied the outstanding violations. The current HOA fines, accruing at $200 per day, now total $4,800. The city environmental fines are separate and ongoing. The estimated liability from the unlicensed worker's injury is, at this point, unknown. She took a breath. The board proposes an immediate and indefinite suspension of all community privileges for 124 Willow Creek, including sanitation services, until all fines and penalties are paid in full. Before the motion could be seconded, a chair scraped. Ethan stood up. He was gaunt, his eyes hollow, but he was on his feet. "Wait," he said. His voice was hoarse but carried in the quiet room. "Please, don't vote." He turned, not to the board, but to the crowd, to his neighbors. "I am responsible. I knew the rules. I let the construction happen. I let my wife's business. I let it cross the lines." He looked down, his shame palpable. "I knew it was wrong. And I stood by, and I said nothing when my mother was insulted and assaulted on my own front porch." A gasp went through the room. "I have already paid the $5,000 environmental fine," he continued, pulling a receipt from his pocket. "I am asking the HOA for a payment plan. I am doing the work. I need time." "He's lying." Sloane bolted to her feet, her voice a shriek. "She's making him say this. She's trying to steal our house." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "This is all her. She wants to make us homeless." Someone in the crowd yelled, "What about the ground lease?" Sloane laughed, a high, brittle, terrifying sound. "Ground lease, life estate. That's ridiculous. That's insane. We own our house." This was the moment. The room was dissolving into chaos. I stood up. I walked calmly to the front table, beside Mrs. Davies. The room fell quiet again, watching. I was not carrying a file. I had 3 pieces of paper, folded in my hand. I placed the first on the table, the official county plat map, the boundary line highlighted in a thick red marker. I placed the second beside it, the signature page of the 99-year ground lease, with Ethan Mercer and Sloane Mercer, written in clear, identical blue ink. Sloane's laughter died. She was staring at the paper. I placed the third document down, the assignment of debt, the legal transfer of their second mortgage, naming Arbormere Assessor LLC as the lien holder. "My name is Lorraine Mercer," I said. My voice was not loud, but it filled the entire room. "I am the beneficiary of the life estate on the land you all stand on." I looked at the board. "And as of 10 days ago, I am the legal lien holder for the second mortgage on the structure at 124 Willow Creek." The whispers were explosive. Sloane looked like she had been struck. "I do not want anyone's house," I said, my eyes finding Sloane's. "I want the boundary lines, and I want the respect that the contract demands." Mason Hart stood. "To be clear, members of the board," he said, his voice a sharp, legal blade. "The land trust is the owner of the land. Because the tenants failed to cure the violations, the trust has the full authority to terminate their lease. At that point, Mr. and Mrs. Mercer are no longer tenants. They are simply occupants with no legal right to remain." Mr. Gable, my old neighbour, stood up from the back. "I'll say it. This has been a disaster. If they don't comply, this community supports immediate enforcement. Get them out." A wave of agreed and yes echoed through the room. Sloane, her face a mask of absolute pale horror, grabbed Ethan's arm. "Ethan, we're leaving? Now. We are leaving." She pulled. Hard. Ethan didn't budge. He stood rooted to the floor, his eyes fixed on the 3 pieces of paper that defined his entire life. He was trapped. I looked past Sloane. I looked only at my son. "Tomorrow morning," I said. 9 o'clock. Choose your path." It was 9 o'clock in the morning. The front lawn, the same lawn I had been forbidden to walk on, was now a stage. A folding card table was set up on the walkway. Around it stood Mason Hart, the president of the HOA, a woman from the title and escrow company holding a portable printer, and a city inspector with a clipboard. I was not at the table. I was 10 feet away, by the porch, holding the garden hose. I was watering the lavender. The pot Sloane had knocked over was upright. The soil was fresh, and I held the nozzle set to a fine mist. My hand was perfectly steady. Sloane appeared at the front door. She was dressed for a performance, her makeup perfect, her phone in one hand, held high and recording. In her other hand, she held a white plastic bucket, full of water. She walked onto the grass, her phone aimed at me. "You see this?" she said to her phone. "She's back. After everything. She's trespassing, and she's threatening me." She took a step, intending to reenact the assault, to paint herself as the victim for her online audience. She raised the bucket. "Sloane, enough." Ethan stepped out of the front door. He walked past her, directly between her and me. He was blocking her shot. He was blocking her path. Sloane's face crumpled. "Ethan, get out of my way. I'm handling this. I'm showing them." "No," he said, not looking at her. "You're done. I'm done." He walked to the table. He picked up the pen. The HOA president pushed a document toward him. "This is the probationary payment plan for $4,800 in fines." Ethan signed it. The city inspector pushed his clipboard over. "This is the 7-day remediation schedule for the balcony removal and soil test." Ethan signed it. The woman from Title and Escrow slid a new lease across the table. This is the new month-to-month tenancy agreement, per the springing clause of the land trust. Ethan signed it. His signature was firm. Sloane Mercer, the title agent said, looking at Sloane, who was frozen on the lawn. As a co-tenant, you must also sign. Sloane's phone wavered. Sign, she said, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. I'm not signing that. I will never sign that. This is my house. Thank you, Mrs. Mercer. That is what we needed to confirm, Mason Hart said. He was holding a single, sealed envelope. He tore it open. Per the severability clause in the original ground lease, if one co-tenant refuses to comply with a legal cure notice, the trust has the right to terminate the lease only for the non-compliant party. He looked directly at Sloane. Your tenancy at 124 Willow Creek is terminated. You, only you. The HOA president spoke up. And this board has a zero-tolerance policy for repeated aggression. A patrol car is 2 minutes away. Any obstruction, any violence, and you will be removed for trespassing. Sloane made a sound, a deep, guttural sound of pure rage. She dropped the phone. She dropped the bucket, water splashing over the grass. She lunged, not at me, but at the table, at the papers, at Ethan. I'll kill you. You did this. The city inspector, a big man, simply put out a hand and stopped her. The police officer, who had been waiting at the curb as requested, was on the lawn in 3 steps, his hand on her arm. Ma'am, you need to calm down. Get your hands off me, she shrieked. The officer looked at me, then at the inspector. Assault, combined with the report from last week. Ma'am, you are being served a temporary restraining order. You have 48 hours to gather your personal belongings and vacate this property. She was silent. All the performance, all the rage just evaporated, leaving a cold, empty void. Ethan had not moved. He just watched her. I walked over to him. I did not touch him. I handed him a single, folded piece of paper. This is a list, I said. There are 21 items on it. The contractors to hire, the permits to pull, the deadlines you must meet. He took it. I am making you one promise. Ethan, complete every item on this list. Restore this property to its original, legal state. When you are done, I will file the paperwork to release the second mortgage. If you fail, if you miss one deadline, I will not say a word. I will simply let the law take the house. He looked at the list. He looked at the ground. He nodded. Once. I'm choosing my path. He turned, walked over to the bucket Sloane had dropped, picked it up, and carried it to the side of the house. I heard the scrape of the old metal latch on the storage shed. I heard the click of the lock. I turned back to the porch. I picked up the hose. The sun was higher now, cutting through the leaves of the oak tree. I squeezed the handle of the nozzle, and a fine mist of water shot out, catching the light, breaking it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. The legal door had closed. The boundary line was drawn, sharp and clear. The knot was cut. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can all connect and share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like. And if you really want to support us, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.